fellow Trek Chatters, I'm Pit Trekkie and welcome to another episode of Pittsburgh's Trek Chat. So for today's episode, what I'm going to be talking about is Star Trek action figures. Now there was a story that came out of the Nacelle company back in September saying that they have acquired licensing for the next generation essentially of Star Trek action figures. And this was confirmed during New York Comic-Con on October 19th, where the Nacelle company actually showed some prototypes and some advertising of some new Star Trek figures that are going to be released within the next year. So this hour-long panel was actually led by the founder of the Nacelle company named Brian Volk-Weiss. And he said that the initial wave of action figures will consist of 8 figures that will range between the times of the original series all the way up to Star Trek Nemesis. So it'll be Enterprise, the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and then all 10 of the original movies. It didn't say anything about the Kelvin timeline or any of the new Trek that's been going on since 2017. Each one of these figures will be standing approximately 6 inches to 7 inches tall, and they will cost around $30 each. Online, a lot of fans have been kind of comparing what these figures are going to look like to the Star Trek Black series of action figures. So that's kind of the basic idea of what we're going to kind of see. So there's something unique about this lineup. Brian Volk-Weiss basically stated that instead of starting with the basic Star Trek characters that have been created multiple times over the years, such as Captain Kirk, Spock, Picard, Riker Troy, and so, they're actually going to start their wave of new action figures with characters who have never had action figures before. So this is going to be very interesting. So basically in the 8 figures that are going to be launched as of next year, it says that the first one is going to be, in the release, will be Captain Edward Jellicoe. And for those of you who may not know this, I'm sure most of you do, he was the captain of the USS Cairo who took command of the Enterprise briefly during the 6th season episodes Chains of Command Part 1 and 2. And obviously Jellicoe was a very disliked captain among the Enterprise crew. But he's also been a fan favorite over the years. And he's actually been revisited as Admiral Jellicoe in Star Trek Prodigy in both Season 1 and Season 2. So he's going to be basically essentially the first action figure that's going to be released. The second figure that's being released is Cadet Peter Preston, who was in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. He was Scotty's nephew, and he was unfortunately killed in engineering during the attack of the Reliant on the Enterprise by Khan. The third figure that's supposed to be getting released is Volk-Weiss, who was the commander of that freighter in Star Trek III: The Search for Spock that actually gave the Genesis device data to Captain Krug on board his bird of prey. Obviously, she was on screen for just like a matter of seconds and didn't really contribute much to the Star Trek canon, but it's going to be an interesting figure to actually add to the fandom collections. We're also going to have Captain Rachel Garrett, who was the captain of the Enterprise C in the 3rd season Next Generation episode, Yesterday's Enterprise. We've never seen a figure of her before, so it's going to be her in her maroon uniform from that episode. Just as a side note, we know that Rachel Garrett is supposed to be a character in the Star Trek Section 31 movie that's going to be coming out on Paramount Plus in the next couple of months. There are also going to be a few others that are going to be released. The 5th figure is supposed to be Tuvix, and he was the character in the 2nd season episode of Voyager, Tuvix, that was created in a transporter accident of a melding of Neelix, Lieutenant Tuvok, and some sort of orchids. And that was actually kind of revisited in the 4th season premiere of Star Trek Lower Decks, where a bunch of characters were created through this same kind of melding on board Voyager, actually aboard the Cerritos. So we're actually going to have a figure of Tuvix for people to add to their collections. Now, the last 3 figures, they did not show any prototypes of these at the convention. At New York Comic-Con, they did have prototypes of Captain Jellicoe, Peter Preston, and Captain Garrett's action figures, which I'm going to get to more in a moment. But they did not show Tuvix or Volk-Weiss. But three other figures are planned for this line. Mirror Jonathan Archer from the Enterprise 4th Season 2-parter in A Mirror Darkly. Wei-Yun, this is one I'm really looking forward to, but Wei-Yun, the Vorta from Deep Space Nine, and Captain Sulu, specifically from Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. So, again, we don't see any pictures of those last three photos, but they're going to be added on later in that line as 2025 goes on. Like I said, at New York Comic Con, they did show this picture of the three prototypes of Captain Garrett, Captain Jellicoe, and Peter Preston. Based on the way they look like they kind of fit in line with the old Art Asylum Diamond Select action figures. Just in terms of the detailing, the art that's on them, just the way they look overall. So they're going to kind of go in line with that. Personally, I was kind of hoping they would go more in line with the old Playmates figures, because that's what I grew up with. So even though they're not as detailed as the Art Asylum Diamond Select toys, they hold more of a special place in my heart. So that's basically the update on Star Trek action figures. And we know Star Trek action figures have been extremely important as part of the Star Trek franchise, going back to the 1970s with the old Mego figures, moving into the 1980s with the Mego Star Trek The Motion Picture line, and then going into 1988 with the Star Trek V Galoob action figures, and then the Star Trek The Next Generation action figures from Season 1 that were released by Galoob in the late 80s. And then, obviously, going into the Playmates Toys action figure lines from 1992 to, I believe it was 1999 or 2000. Then those faded away and basically went right into the Art Asylum and Diamond Select action figure line. And in 2009, Playmates came back for the Star Trek 2009 movie release. And then Playmates recently came back out within, I believe it was in 2022, and had their limited release of some Next Generation, Discovery, and some Star Trek movie figures, plus the Phaser and Communicator roleplay toy and the original Enterprise and the Enterprise D. Now we also have the XO6 figures, which are extremely detailed with action figures and are basically just for collection. But I think this is going to be a nice little addition, and it's nice to see that the Star Trek action figures are continuing on at this point. I'm really surprised that they aren't adding anything from Discovery or Strange New Worlds. But to be honest with you, I don't know if those would have as much popularity at this time as bringing back some of the more legacy kind of characters. I could be wrong. That's just my opinion, my guess on it. But these figures are supposed to be for pre-release in the next few months going into 2025, with the release happening as we get later into 2025, roughly around the fall. So I'd like to know what your thoughts are about these action figures that were announced back in September through the Nacelle Company and partially previewed during New York Comic Con in October. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are. Please put your comments down below. You can obviously go back and watch this series here on YouTube. Just go to my channel, youtube.com/Pittsburgh Trek Chat. You can also follow the show on Facebook, facebook.com/Pittsburgh Trek Chat. You can also follow the show on X @PGH Trek Chat. I'm looking forward to the next episode, and until then, may yins live long and prosper.